All right, guys, we've heard the customers loud and clear. They're sick of AI ruining our products.
And you know what? Microsoft kind of had to admit that, they're losing.
Something massive just happened. Microsoft, one of the most powerful tech companies on the planet, just admitted that their own operating system is a disaster. Not a blogger, not a YouTuber, not an angry Reddit thread. Microsoft itself. And what they admitted is way worse than you think, because this is not just about a buggy update or a feature nobody asked for. This is about over 1 billion people being used as test subjects for an AI experiment that went completely off the rails. And the scary part? They knew. They knew it was too much, too fast, and too invasive, and they pushed it anyway. So today, we're going to break down exactly what went wrong, why Microsoft made these decisions, what it means for your computer right now, and what they're not telling you about where this is all heading. Because if you're running Windows 11 or you're being pressured to upgrade to it, you need to understand what you're actually agreeing to. Stay with me, because this story gets a lot darker before it gets better. Here's something most people don't realize. What's happening with Windows 11 right now is not new. Microsoft has a pattern, a very specific, very embarrassing pattern of pushing features nobody wants, getting destroyed by public backlash, quietly retreating, and then doing the exact same thing again a few years later. Let's go back to the 1990s. Microsoft introduced Clippy. If you're over 50, you remember this thing, a little animated paperclip that would pop up on your screen out of nowhere and ask if you needed help writing a letter. Nobody asked for Clippy. Nobody wanted Clippy. It became one of the most mocked features in the history of personal computing. Microsoft eventually killed it off completely. Lesson learned, right? Wrong. Fast forward to 2015. Microsoft tried again with Cortana, a voice assistant built directly into Windows, meant to compete with Siri and Alexa. Same story. Users ignored it. Businesses disabled it on day one. It got so unpopular that Microsoft eventually ripped Cortana out of Windows entirely. 2 massive failures. 2 very public humiliations. And here's the question you should be asking yourself right now. If they failed twice with the same strategy, what did they do differently the third time? The answer is nothing. They just made it impossible to remove. And that's exactly where Copilot comes in. But before we get there, you need to understand just how deep this goes, because what Microsoft built into Windows 11 goes far beyond an annoying assistant. When most people hear the word bloatware, they think of a few extra apps pre-installed on a new laptop. Annoying, but harmless. What Microsoft built into Windows 11 is something else entirely. Let's start with the obvious stuff. Windows 11 runs ads inside the Start menu, not suggestions, not recommendations. Actual advertisements for products inside an operating system that you either paid for or came pre-installed on a device you paid for. When users pushed back hard enough, Microsoft pulled some of them. But the fact that they tried it at all tells you exactly how they see you, not as a customer, as an audience. Then there's the telemetry. Windows 11 is constantly sending information back to Microsoft. Usage data, behavioral patterns, system information. You can adjust some settings, but you cannot turn it off completely. It's baked in. Then there's the Microsoft account situation. Try setting up a new Windows 11 computer without creating a Microsoft account. For a long time, you couldn't. Yeah, they blocked almost every workaround. They want you logged in, connected to OneDrive, and feeding data into their ecosystem at all times. And then there's Copilot. Unlike Clippy, which you could close with one click, Copilot is not a window you close. It lives inside your operating system. It's embedded in Notepad, the snipping tool, the Photos app, File Explorer, the Start menu. It runs in the background constantly. It uses your RAM, it affects your performance, and you did not ask for any of it. Users started noticing their computers slowing down, apps taking longer to open, and for gamers, this one really hurt. Frame rates dropping noticeably compared to Windows 10 on machines that were not old, not underpowered, not in need of an upgrade. One major Windows update cut NVIDIA gaming performance in half. Your GPU did not get worse overnight. Windows made it worse. So now you're probably wondering, okay, but all of that sounds bad, but surely there's a reason Microsoft did all this. And you'd be right. There is a reason, but it's not the reason they'll tell you publicly, and that reason explains every single decision they've made. We'll get to that in just a moment, but first, we need to talk about the feature that took this entire situation from frustrating to genuinely alarming. What I'm about to tell you is real. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is a feature that Microsoft built, announced, and has been pushing forward despite enormous backlash from security researchers, privacy experts, and regular users alike. It's called Recall. Here's what it does. Recall takes continuous screenshots of everything happening on your screen. Everything. Your emails, your bank account, your private messages, your medical searches, your personal documents. Every single thing you do on your computer captured in a visual record. Microsoft's stated purpose was that AI would learn your habits and help you find things you did previously, like a searchable memory for your computer. Sounds convenient, right? Here's what they did not make clear up front. All of that screenshot data sits in a database on your machine, processed by AI models that create enormous security vulnerabilities. Cybersecurity researchers demonstrated within days of the feature being announced that this screenshot database could be accessed and exploited by malicious software. Passwords that appeared on screen were being captured. Financial data was sitting in a searchable database. And here's the part that should make anyone pause. Any malware that gets onto your computer can now access a complete visual history of everything you have ever done on it. Microsoft delayed the rollout after the backlash. They made it opt-in, added some encryption, and then quietly started pushing it out again to Copilot Plus PCs. They adjusted it, but they never killed it. And then in late 2025, Microsoft acknowledged something that should have made headlines everywhere. The AI powering these features can hallucinate. Their word. It can generate false information, make incorrect connections, and in worst-case scenarios, create outputs that interact badly with security systems. The operating system, running on over 1 billion machines worldwide, has AI components that its own creators admit can malfunction in unpredictable and uncontrollable ways. Now think about that for a second, because once you sit with it, a very obvious question surfaces. Why would a company that knows all of this keep pushing forward anyway? And the answer to that question explains the entire Windows 11 strategy from top to bottom. And that's exactly what we're going to break down next. To understand why Microsoft made every decision we've talked about so far, you need to understand one thing. Windows is no longer Microsoft's main business. When Satya Nadella took over as CEO in 2014, he made a call that changed the company forever. He shifted the entire focus from selling software to selling cloud services and subscriptions. Today, Microsoft's real money comes from Azure, their cloud platform. From Microsoft, 365 subscriptions. From Teams licensing, from LinkedIn, from AI services built on top of their multi-billion-dollar investment in OpenAI. Windows is not the product anymore. Windows is the delivery vehicle. It's the platform through which Microsoft pushes you toward their subscriptions, collects your behavioral data for AI training, and keeps you locked inside their ecosystem. And once you understand that, everything else snaps into focus. The Copilot that won't go away. The OneDrive prompts that never stop. The Microsoft account you're forced to create. The ads in the start menu. The telemetry you can't fully disable. None of it is accidental. None of it is a mistake. All of it serves the same commercial function. Now here's the part that connects everything. When the AI boom exploded across the tech industry, every major company scrambled to slap AI onto their products and announce it to investors. Microsoft had just poured billions into OpenAI and needed to show returns. Windows became the showcase, and users became the test subjects. The backlash that followed was the loudest Microsoft had faced since Windows 8, which was itself a disaster. And Microsoft's response has been to make PR statements about listening to users while continuing to push Copilot, continuing to develop recall, and continuing to tighten the upgrade pressure. Admitting a mistake and actually fixing it are two very different things. And right now, Microsoft is doing a lot of the first and very little of the second, which brings us to something that's affecting millions of people right now, whether they know it or not. Here's a situation that millions of people are facing and many don't fully understand yet. Windows 10 support officially ended in October 2025. That means no more security patches, no more vulnerability fixes. If you're still on Windows 10 after that date, you are running a system that hackers know is unprotected because Microsoft announced that deadline publicly. So the pressure to upgrade to Windows 11 is real. But here's the trap. Windows 11 has strict hardware requirements built around a chip called TPM 2.0. A massive number of perfectly functional computers from just a few years ago don't meet that requirement. These machines are not slow. They're not broken. They run fine. But Microsoft says they're not compatible. So users face two options. Buy new hardware, which is exactly what Microsoft's hardware partners would love, or use a workaround tool like Rufus to bypass the requirements and install Windows 11 anyway. Millions of people have done exactly that. Microsoft has quietly tolerated it while also signaling that future updates could block those installations entirely, effectively forcing hardware purchases by bricking computers that don't meet the official requirements. You're being pushed off a product you were happy with toward a product you don't want, on a timeline set by the company that profits from your upgrade. And if your machine doesn't qualify, the message is simple. Buy a new one. This is not customer service. This is a business model. But here's the thing. For the first time in a long time, people actually have somewhere to go. And the alternatives are better than they've ever been. That's what we need to look at next, because this might be the most important part of the whole conversation. For most of the history of personal computing, if you used a PC, you used Windows. There wasn't really a meaningful alternative for most people. That has changed. Apple's transition to its own M-series chips completely changed what a personal computer feels like. MacBooks running on M-series processors are genuinely faster, run cooler, last significantly longer on battery, and have had none of the identity crisis that Windows 11 is going through. Nobody running a modern MacBook is dealing with an AI feature taking continuous screenshots of their screen. Mac market share has been climbing steadily, particularly among users who have simply lost patience with where Windows is heading. Then there's Linux. For years, Linux was seen as a hobbyist option, something for programmers and tech enthusiasts who like tinkering. That conversation has shifted dramatically, and one device deserves a lot of credit for that shift: the Steam Deck. Valve built a handheld gaming device running Linux and proved to millions of people that you can play thousands of modern games on a non-Windows system without a painful setup process. That opened a door that developers started walking through. Proton and Wine compatibility layers improved dramatically, and now there are users who have switched their primary computers to Linux distributions like Ubuntu, Fedora, or Pop_OS, and found that for everyday tasks, browsing, streaming, productivity, and gaming, it works. And it works without forced updates you didn't approve, without telemetry you can't control, without AI features you never asked for. The freedom alone has been enough to pull technically comfortable users away from Windows at a rate that Microsoft has to be paying attention to. The exits are wider than they have ever been, and Microsoft knows it, which is exactly why what's coming next matters so much, because the strategy Microsoft has laid out for the future of Windows makes everything we've talked about today look like a warm-up. Everything we've talked about so far is not the destination. It's the setup. Because what Microsoft has signaled about the future of Windows makes the current situation look tame by comparison. The trajectory is clear. Future versions of Windows will be even more AI dependent, even more cloud connected, even more subscription oriented. The vision Microsoft is moving toward is an operating system that you do not fully own, do not fully control, and cannot meaningfully opt out of if you want to stay in the Windows ecosystem. Every feature that users have pushed back against, recall, Copilot, start menu ads, forced Microsoft accounts, is a test of how much friction users will tolerate before leaving. And so far, the answer has been quite a lot. Most people stay because switching is inconvenient, because their work depends on specific software, because the familiar is easier than the unknown. Microsoft is counting on that. They are betting that inertia is stronger than frustration, and historically, they've been right. But the variables are changing. The alternatives are stronger. The backlash is louder, and the goodwill Microsoft built over decades of being the default choice for personal computing is being spent faster than they can replenish it. The most dangerous version of this story is not what Microsoft has already done. It's what they'll do when they've confirmed that users will accept it. And right now, they are running that experiment on your computer. Now, the conclusion of all of this comes down to one thing, and that's what we need to sit with before we wrap up. Let's bring all of this together, because when you look at the full picture, something becomes very clear. Microsoft did not accidentally create a bloated, invasive, frustrating operating system. They built exactly what they intended to build, a platform designed not primarily to serve you, but to monetize you. Every layer of Windows 11, the AI that won't go away, the ads in places they shouldn't be, the surveillance feature they called a productivity tool, the forced upgrades, the hardware requirements that conveniently push you toward new purchases, all of it points in the same direction, toward a future where your computer is not really yours, where you rent access to an ecosystem, feed data into a machine you don't control, and pay subscriptions for the privilege. That's the destination. Windows 11 is just the road getting there. Now, Microsoft has started pulling back on some of the most aggressive elements. They've acknowledged the bloat. They've softened some of the Copilot presence. They've made recall opt-in rather than automatic. And that matters. Public pressure works. User backlash works. The fact that they have had to retreat, even partially, is proof that the conversation we're having right now makes a difference. But retreating slightly from a bad position is not the same as changing direction. And until Microsoft demonstrates that they are putting users ahead of their subscription revenue and their AI investment story, the underlying incentives remain exactly the same. So what do you do with all of this? That's actually the most practical question. You pay attention. You understand what's running on your machine and why. You take your privacy settings seriously. You explore the alternatives even if you don't switch, because knowing they exist gives you leverage. And you make decisions based on what actually serves you, not on what a default installation tells you is normal. Because normal is a setting they chose. And you can choose differently. If you want to go even deeper on this, the story of how Microsoft's relationship with its own users broke down goes back further than Windows 11. And in the next video, we're going to trace exactly how that happened, because some of the decisions that led here were made decades ago, and almost nobody talked about them at the time. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss that one. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Are you staying on Windows, making the switch, or already gone? Because that conversation is worth having.